Welcome to our epic ocean, where critical solutions to a planet in peril are brought to the surface. Our epic ocean celebrates all that is epic about the ocean and why it is the planet's most vital resource. And now to our host, Rich Gurman.
Dr. Sylvia Earle is the president and chairman of Mission Blue. She's a National Geographic Society Explorer in residence and was dubbed Her Deepness by the New Yorker and New York Times. The Library of Congress made her a living legend, and Time magazine declared her the first hero for the planet. She was the first female chief scientist of NOAA, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. She is an ocean elder, an oceanographer, explorer, author, and lecturer. Over the years, Dr. Earle has brought her infinite wisdom and deep knowledge of how our planet works to both the professional world and the masses via books, films, numerous talks, lectures, and interviews. One in particular with NRDC from 10 years ago has stuck with me, where she said, "Think of the ocean as the blue heart of the planet." She said the ocean controls climate and weather. It generates most of the oxygen we breathe. It's where 97% of the water is. The ocean is our life support system, and unless we really understand and appreciate it, we are not going to take care of it. After personally spending thousands of hours with whales and dolphins in the open ocean, I made a statement. I said, these animals, these are my gurus, my greatest teachers. They love in a way with which we are not familiar. Whales hold sacred wisdom and represent forgiveness, and the dolphins are just pure love, pure joy. In my experience, very few humans truly embody these attributes. For me, and for countless ocean lovers around the world, Dr. Earle is considered a guru, a teacher, a role model, a true ocean hero. And as you will hear today, she has the sage wisdom of a whale and speaks with the joy and love of a dolphin when it comes to the ocean and marine life that we all love so much. Dr. Earle, welcome to our epic ocean. It is truly an honor. How are you today?
I'm doing fine and just glad to be on board. Thank you.
Well, we couldn't be more grateful to have you on board, so let's dive in. The tagline of this show is critical solutions to a planet in peril. It's a bold statement, but to me it speaks to the reality of the world that we live in. Most people have not looked below the surface of the ocean, let alone dedicated their life to understanding it like you have. I'm curious, what changes have you witnessed with your own ocean eyes in your lifetime? And do you agree that the planet is in a state of peril?
Well, I think there's good news and there's not such good news. I think since I began exploring the ocean as a would-be scientist back in 1950s, we have literally learned more about the ocean, about the planet, about ourselves, about who we are, about where we've come from, where we might be going. We certainly have learned more about the importance of the natural systems that make Earth exceptional, not just in the solar system, but in the universe, where, if you think about it, the circumstances that make life possible, our lives very much included, are not replicated anywhere else, as far as we know. And even if the circumstances are replicated elsewhere, Earth wouldn't be the same as that other mythical place, wherever it is. The Earth is our home. It's taken Earth 4.5 billion years from basic rocks and water, ultimately, to be infused with life, and over the ages to interact and become what we now take for granted. This, what is air? Where did it come from? What is water? Where did it come from? What is this ocean? Where did it come from? Where did life in the ocean originate? And a lot of these questions people may have been asking throughout time, but But it's only right about now that we're beginning to get some answers that we can count on, that we have learned enough to know both what we do know and also to understand the magnitude of our ignorance, which is vast. So I think that's progress, knowing and respecting that we don't have all the answers. But at the same time, we have lost more in the same era that I have been privileged to experience. This great time of learning, but also this tragic time of loss. 90% of the sharks are gone. 90% or more of the old growth forests have been consumed, mostly since the beginning of the 20th century. We really know how to kill things. We are really good at destroying, including one another. I mean, we've become very proficient at waging war on one another. But waging war on nature, not even thinking of it that way, we call it progress, we call it development when we eliminate forests and plant cities, when we clear ways for roads and farms and transform even ocean floor into parking lots. We have really changed the configuration of our continents and our islands by altering the shorelines with amazing speed. Maps that were as accurate as they could be in 1900 are significantly greater 122 years later. Because why? We've built channels, we've taken ancient seagrass meadows and other shallow water communities and dug them up, made dry land out of what was once prosperous, diverse, and really important ocean communities. We turned coral reefs into building material and replaced where they were thriving, and mangroves and other marshes, whatever, drain the swamp, big theme of the 20th century. And even now, the idea that we can improve a place by taking a natural situation, whatever it is, and putting some human device or human occupation or human transformation. So we've converted so much of the natural world that took a very long time to develop, taken us a very short time to basically destroy. So the good news further is we can still breathe. I mean, not as with as much confidence as we had when I was a child, but at least we know what we're doing, contaminating the air with the effluent, the things that we think that somehow used to think that burning fossil fuels, fires, whatever it is, putting the exhaust from chemical plants both into the skies and into the water or into the land, not thinking that it could possibly make a difference. At least we now know Earth is in trouble because of our actions. Imagine if we did not know. Imagine if we continued the same trajectory of converting natural systems to human purposes and were not respectful or aware of the downside. And I mean, I can forgive our long ago ancestors and even some of our recent ancestors for believing somehow that damming a river or cutting a place where boats could come into harbors or developing just the most extravagantly effective methods for finding, catching, and marketing ocean wildlife, thinking that it was a good thing because people like to eat life from the sea. People like to eat. Why not take whatever you have available? And the ocean seemed like an endless warehouse, and it was free, or at least it's accounted for as free. So why not give subsidies to fishermen to go out and take free goods and then market them to the world? Trouble is, that there are limits, and the consequences of cutting big swaths across the ocean with dredges and bottom trawls and nets straining the life out of the ocean, clear cutting the ocean the way we've had the habit of clear cutting forests. We know now, we're beginning to see that we're having to pay for our extravagant ways that were largely, but not entirely, done in ignorance. I mean, I'd have to say that greed and combined with ignorance has been deadly.
Yeah, and that actually speaks to what I was going to say next. I'm with you. I feel like this planet is a true miracle, and getting to live here is the greatest blessing imaginable. That heaven is right here on Earth, and yet we seem, like you said, to be destroying ourselves and the resources of this planet simultaneously. And like we're one of the very few species with the conscious awareness to witness and understand the immense beauty that surrounds us. And you would hope that we would love and respect the miracle that is our mother, the world that we grew out of.
I do think there are other creatures that respect and feel, call it beauty if you will, but the pleasure of nature. I've seen dogs sitting on the shore watching the sunset. I've seen birds behaving in what I would have to say is a joyful way. They aren't just making a living. They're exuberant in their behavior. Dolphins, they're
For sure.
I don't think it's unique to humans, and I know you know that.
Sure.
I know you know that.
I guess my
other
question
animals
to
feel
your point is,
pleasure and pain.
for sure. My point is to what you were saying before. Are we just an ignorant species? Are we selfish? Like you said, are we greedy? Are we God's experiment gone wrong?
Well, we are endowed with insight, and it comes from experience that has been acquired over not just centuries and not even just millennia, but probably from the beginning of humans as humans, we've been acquiring knowledge and passing it along. A baby doesn't know anything. We teach our children the ways of the world. And again, we're not unique in that respect. Dolphins certainly teach their young. Elephants certainly convey knowledge, even wisdom of what has been passed along in their respective societies. They're not just, like machines that are replicated every generation the same. They acquire knowledge of where they live, the feeding areas, the places where they play. They migrate over, many species migrate over long distances and learn how to get from here to there and pass that knowledge along.
That's right.
But humans have been really great disruptors. We've cut through those pathways, whether on the land or in the ocean or in the skies above, changing and altering the migratory pathways of birds. We didn't even know, I think until fairly recent times, that there are a lot of animals in the sea that have migratory pathways that have been learned, and they have now been disrupted with noise, by traffic, by loss of chemical signals, or rather overwhelming the natural signals that have been developed over their long history that precedes our long history by a lot. We are, relatively speaking, newcomers, and we have the capacity in our best interests to respect the rest of the natural world, because unlike our predecessors who did not know what is now known to kids, because we did not have the capacity to understand what we now can see. I mean, kids of today, not universally, but knowledge of what Earth looks like from space is available. It's anybody who has access to books and computers and radios have heard the news, seen evidence that here we are, this, as you say, this miracle of a planet in a universe that's really hostile otherwise.
Yeah. Speaking of looking at the Earth from space, lately there's been a trend where extreme funding is going towards space exploration. And I'm all for getting to know the unknown, but it seems that these massive resources might be better used for protecting our current home. Last I heard, Mars doesn't have air to breathe or an ocean. And as you know, the majority of our ocean right here is yet to be explored. So I'm curious of your thoughts on this. Like, are you for it, against it? Do you feel it's the responsibility of the wealthiest people on the planet to use their resources to help protect this planet?
Well, I'm not opposed to reaching to understand the unknown beyond Earth and to see ourselves in perspective. I would hope that those governments and those individuals who have wealth that is comparable to some governments, which originates, of course, taxes paid by the people, but whatever the source of government funding, it represents humans, people, that it would be obvious that now that we know that Earth is largely still unknown and that it is our life support system and it's in trouble, that our highest priority must be to keep our planet, our home, safe. I really don't have any objections to people pressing the limits of going skyward, but it is a puzzle. It's really baffling, the neglect that we have embraced with respect to getting to know Earth. And the ocean dominates. Now we know that climate, weather, temperature, planetary chemistry are governed by the living ocean. It's not a matter of just rocks and water. This is a living system, all connected, land and sea, air, water, the chemistry of rocks. It all fits together. A big, beautiful, living system. And we've only managed to get our minds wrapped around a few pieces of the puzzle about what is Earth and how does it function. But we know enough to know that we have put ourselves at risk by putting nature at risk. And therefore, our highest priority, above all else, must be keeping Earth safe, reversing the decline. Somebody put it neatly when they said, well, kind of hard to count your money if you can't breathe. So you can have all the money in the world, but if the planet is not working in your favor, it's not going to do you any good.
Yeah, it sure seems pretty obvious that we're at an all hands on deck moment, and all these resources, attention, and focus should be on saving our home. I know I'm preaching to the choir on that one. So, take us back in time, if you will, and I'm sure you've been asked this 1,000 times, but what I know is our viewers love connecting via story. I was reading an interview that you did with Rolex where you shared how becoming an ocean explorer was not a conscious decision for you. And I believe it started with a wave knocking you down at age 3. So the question is, why did you become an ocean explorer? Was there a turning point, aha moment where you knew you had no choice? Like, this is how I'm going to spend the rest of my life.
No, it's just been I guess, a journey that hasn't wavered along the way. Of course, there are ups and downs in anybody's life where you're occupied with many distractions. It's true with, right now, what is commanding the interest of civilization? We've got wars and disease and
Disease, yeah.
the human condition, hunger, poverty, and many things. But for me, every opportunity, not only that came my way, but making opportunities, making decisions. You can go through life just responding to what happens. And I do remember counseling myself at one point that I could go through life just taking what comes, or I could be proactive and decide this is what I want to do, and to make that a priority, and put other things, even though they're important, to prioritize doing what it takes to explore the ocean. I mean, starting the company to build little submarines. As a scientist, it's not the usual thing to do. But for me, frustration over not being able to go beyond where divers can go. Grateful that somebody, Jacques Cousteau and Emile Gagnon, came along at a moment in time, developed a technology that did not exist before they came along, to be able to have access to the sea. And I became enamored with the idea of little submarines by reading William Beebe's book, Half Mile Down. He was making descents in little submarines before I was born. Thank you, William Beebe, for inspiring me to want to know that it's possible to start with it from just an idea, a vision, a dream, and make that dream become a reality. How do you do that? Well, I didn't have a clue, but I know that my father started a business as an engineer, a little company. When we moved from New Jersey to Florida, he didn't wait for somebody to say, here, I want you to do this. He started his own endeavor. It's called Earle Electric. And he made a business.
Where in Florida was this? I grew up. Where in Florida were you?
Yes.
Where in Florida?
On the West Coast, on the Gulf Coast.
Okay.
On the Gulf Coast,
Dunedin,
near
I know it. Yep.
Where?
I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. On the east coast of Florida, so I know it well. And
East
I lived in
Coast.
Key West before
yeah.
moving. Yeah, I lived in Key West before I moved out here. So I want to come back to little submarines because I know that's important to you. But I want to stay back in your proactive past, as you called it. You were a pretty radical trailblazer as a Harvard scientist turned ocean explorer over 50 years ago, leading an all-female team of aquanauts in 1970 in the Tektite 2 project in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And back then, you seized the opportunity to explain the nature of the ocean, its importance and vulnerability, when the media was focused on the fact that you were all women, right? So what was that like? And I'm curious, how does gender and racial equality fit into the equation of ocean conservation today?
Well, I've never intended to be, a trailblazer. In fact, I'm not sure that I really am. I think I can look at others like Beebe, who truly was, Cousteau, definitely. But I was just responding. Well, let's say it was never intentional.
Okay.
It was given an opening, a little notice on the bulletin board at Harvard, soliciting scientists to put together proposals to live underwater for 2 weeks, to submit a research idea what you would do if given a chance. And it was expected that you would know how to dive, but there weren't, and the proposal had to be up to speed, selected by those who were in charge of the program. And the Smithsonian Institution reviewed the proposals that came in, but nobody bothered to put in the announcement that only men needed to apply, because I think no one imagined that women would apply. I wasn't the only one. There are others who said, yeah, that'd be nice. I'm a scientist, and put together proposals about what they might like to do given a chance to live underwater for 2 weeks. People go off in the mountains and deserts and into polar regions and spend time. Jane Goodall spent 15 years and more going into the forest to learn about chimpanzees. But
Right.
The idea that we would, anyway, that when women applied in a project where only men were expected, at first it created consternation. But the head of the program, James Miller, was his call whether there should or shouldn't be women. And he allegedly said, well, half the fish are female. I guess we could put up with a few women. And they did. They, however, would not let me participate with the male colleagues that I had submitted. Together, we'd submitted a proposal to look at the feeding behavior of fish, the day-night behavior of fish, the importance of grazing fish on the seaweeds, the plants. My specialty was as a botanist, and so I had teamed up with several fish specialists for our proposal. But anyway, when they decided that men and women living together was not acceptable, I was asked if I would be willing to lead a team of just women, and could I carve out a part of that proposal where I would be doing it on my own. And so I said, okay, we can do this. I hadn't met the other women involved, but we got along just fine. And more than that, we had a great time. And friendships developed under unexpected circumstances.
That's great. Do you happen to keep in touch with those women for, after that happened, for years after? Or?
Yeah, we have been in touch. One in particular, Alina Smont, who was focused on corals and coral reef ecology. Mm-hmm. And Anne Hurley, who, after the Tektite experience, she had her Ph.D., but went on to get a degree in law. She said the ocean needs a good lawyer. And she worked with the Justice Department for many years as an environmental lawyer.
Nice. So you might not consider or use the word trailblazer for yourself, but I have to imagine that project went a long way to empowering women to really, step out and do the things that they wanted to do. And, if you look at so many of the influential people in the ocean conservation world today, they're females. So I think it's fair you could take a little, if not a lot of credit for that. Let's go back a little. You mentioned priority. Okay.
Part of the, I suppose, the value of the Tektite project for acceptance of women underwater in oceanography, or in the many things that mean access to the sea, and in space. NASA had a key role in the Tektite project. They were interested in the behavior of humans under isolated circumstances. And it was a simulated isolation for us, in that we're not supposed to have personal contact with anybody except by camera and voice. during the time that we were submerged. So they imposed isolation that was supposed to be to simulate what it would be like if you were in space.
Got it.
So we could see, astronauts can see people below, and they could certainly communicate, but there wasn't, you couldn't have face-to-face contact, personal contact. And we were evaluated, all the teams, there were 10 teams in all, 9 all male and 1 all female. And psychologically, and in terms of the time that we spent actually doing things, actually out in the water conducting our research, the women's team came out right on top. That was
Nice.
unexpected.
Nice.
The fact that we succeeded at all was a surprise to some, but according to those in charge of the program, that we really did convince the would-be skeptics, or those who had been resisting having women in space for whatever reasons, that should not be a governing factor, that gender wasn't as big an issue as some imagined it to be. But still, even so, our program in 1970, it took more than a decade before women were really allowed to be astronauts. So the wheels turn slowly. But I can't tell you how many people have said that was for them a turning point, seeing us out there, down there, doing things. And it was, okay, well, doing it is one thing, but having the world take notice and publicizing the fact that we were out there as women doing what some regarded as heavy lifting, and really wasn't. I mean, but it looked that way. But just showing this should be ordinary.
Yeah.
That it was the wave of communicating what we did, not the fact that we did it, but the fact that it was celebrated all over the world. I mean, I have a file more than a foot thick of just clippings that were, because it was considered a sensation that there were women actually out there doing stuff. Of course, the same thing happened with Sally Ride and with the other women astronauts. In a way, it's a little condescending. Like, why are you surprised? Women have been out there side by side with men throughout all of history. But we've created this attitude that I hope we helped upend, not just by doing it, but by having media celebrate it and making little kids aware that, okay, girls can do these things, not just guys. And it's been an inspiration for young men too, because I think maybe if girls can do it, I can do it too.
Very good. I love that. So earlier you mentioned priorities. You stated that it took you, I think, 10 years to get your Ph.D. because you decided in that process to get married and raise a couple children while working and studying. And you've achieved incredible success, yet there were sacrifices made as families sometimes took a back seat. And I think this is a very common story when it comes to people like you with great passion and dedication. So I'm curious, how did you and do you find balance? And do you have any advice that you would give others with a great passion to do work that benefits something much greater than themselves and their family?
There's nothing that I personally can say in a blanket way, because everyone is different. And the challenges everyone faces, men and women, are something you have to figure out for yourself. But if there's one thing, it's just believe in yourself and don't think of whatever choices you make as sacrifices, but rather as choices. And that in the end, sometimes you find yourself going down in a path that you feel you must for one reason or another, but never give up your what makes you you, that whatever it is that sets you apart from all others. Find that something, whether it's art or music or, science or teaching, or if you just have a passion for numbers, you want to be out there, you want to run a business, you don't know how to start, just figure it out. Look in the mirror and say, I can do this. And yes, there will be choices about some things I'll have to give up, but other things will advance. If I could go back and redo my own life, there's some other choices I would make in light of what I now know. I would have spent more time respecting what my children, their priorities. And I tried to, through my lens, give back in ways that other moms and dads can't. I mean, all of my kids have been diving with whales. They've all been out with a wild dolphin, and they do treasure those times. I bent the rules sometimes, taking the kids out of school so they could go out and spend some time with me. And it was selfish in a way, because I wanted them to see and experience what I love, hoping that maybe some of it would rub off on them, that maybe they would love it too. But there are some things that I know that mattered to them that I missed. And I can't recreate those times. I probably would have done a better job if I had, take two. let's try this again. What would I do differently? I probably would have spent as much more time, even though I gave my kids experiences that were unique, and we did really things that I wouldn't trade for anything. Maybe they wouldn't either. There are moments that your children and others around you to see the world and my role in it, that I should have been more attentive to respect their wishes instead of just being so single-minded as I sometimes had to be.
I think finding balance. What was the analogy I heard once? That finding balance in life is like juggling a dozen eggs while standing on one leg in a hammock. It's not hard. And for someone like you who has that massive vision and goal to help, yeah, in a hurricane, it's a challenge. So I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability in talking about that. Let's shift a little into
it. I still have to make choices.
Yeah, absolutely. It never ends. So I'd like to shift a little and focus on it never ends. And I want to talk a lot about solutions. I'm a big believer that the best thing that we can do for the ocean is just leave it alone. Right here where I live in Laguna Beach,
yes.
I think it's a really yes. Where I live in Laguna Beach is a great example. We have a 6 mile, and you're very familiar with this. We have a 6 mile stretch of coastline that is not only a marine protected area in MPA, but it's a no-take zone. I've been paddleboarding every single day right here since 2010. And when I started, there was no fish out there. And the reason there was no fish was the fishermen caught them all. And then on January 1st, 2012, it became illegal to fish. And I'm telling you what, 6 months later, I would paddle out, I would look down, and what would I see everywhere? Fish. Today, I proudly call this area the greatest aquarium in the world. And I think it's just a small example of what's possible. And even though it's been controversial, most people here are proud of the stance that we've taken to protect our coast. And I think Cabo Pulmo in Mexico, which of course you're very familiar with, is another great example of a protected area that has seen astounding results when we just leave the ocean alone. You have a beautiful vision for what you call hope spots, a global network of MPAs. Can you speak about why this is so critical, and if we truly want to restore the ocean? Yeah.
Well, I call these so-called no-take areas give-back areas. We're giving back what we have lost, what we destroyed. And while there is a long and honorable history of people known as fishermen and women over the ages, throughout all of human history, we have taken from the wild to feed ourselves. We've cut down old trees to foster our prosperity, to make space for our success. We have occupied so much of the planet now. There are now close to 8 billion of us. I have watched human population quadruple during my lifetime, and it's projected to keep on growing. 10 billion people by the middle of the 21st century, if we keep on the current trajectory. But at the same time, the very systems that underpin our prosperity are not keeping pace. Just consider that on the order of 90% of many of the fish across the board, from sharks to tunas to cod, California, the rockfish, the lobsters, were invading Antarctica with the same kind of aggressive appetite, industrial taking of krill. Started out on the order of 200 years ago in the waters at the edge of Antarctica, with taking seals in the subantarctic islands and moving inexorably along the continent of Antarctica, seals, killing them, taking them for their fur. That dwindled. Birds, especially penguins, became the next target for industrial extraction until they were at a level where protection seemed inevitable, if there were to be any. And then whales, same trajectory. Now krill and ice fish. I don't know what it's going to take for us to learn. The ocean is not just filled with free goods out there waiting for ambitious individuals, call them hunters, call them whalers, call them sealers, call them fishermen. But we're just taking from nature. It was one thing when our numbers were small and nature was more intact. But no species other than humans have so aggressively and so comprehensively just extracted from nature, and from forests to the skies above with wild birds that we used to take on an industrial commercial scale. Now that's diminished considerably, although some still do take wild birds, mostly not on an industrial scale. They're still hunting. There's still bushmeat for those who have few choices to take not just birds but little furry animals for their sustenance. But for the ocean, we are taking wildlife on an industrial scale. It's not just those who really need to take ocean wildlife. It's far beyond that. This is big business. This is industrial extraction of, if it belongs to anyone, all of us have a voice or should have a voice. But wildlife from the ocean is no longer food security, except for a very small portion of human population. It is food choice, mostly luxury choice. We have no business eating tuna in Chicago or San Francisco or other places where tuna do not naturally occur. Some island countries, some coastal communities, wild fish really figures largely in their diet as a need. It's how they get their calories. But that's not true of most people around most of the planet. We are reliant on others who are making a living by taking free goods, taking from nature, subsidized by taxpayers around the world. billions of dollars subsidize commercial and industrial scale extraction of wildlife. And we applaud it. We think it's good because we've developed a habit. We've developed a taste, a luxury taste for eating wild animals from the sea. But we don't see it that way. We have to lift the veil that convinces people that it's okay. It's really the big lie that it's okay. It isn't okay. We're taking from our life support system, we're just taking those elements that hold the planet steady, that are important for the diverse network of life. It's one thing to catch dinner. It's another thing to catch wildlife by the ton and treat wildlife as money, which is what we're doing. We kind of stopped that with commercially taking birds for their feathers or to sell it for whatever purposes. But we haven't faced up to the reality of what we're doing to the ocean. And with whales, because we did face up to the reality of taking wildlife for money, killing whales so that we could sell them for oil and for meat, either ground up for pet food or some cases actually people food. And some people still do take whales for consumption directly. They don't go out and buy whale meat. They actually do take dolphins and whales, and it's part of their diet. And for some, it's a need. For most, it's a choice. But when we stopped commercial killing of the big whales, the great whales, in 1986, it made a difference, just as in your backyard, where, California, this network of fully protected areas, give back areas, the fish are returning. The whales are returning too. There are more whales today than when I was a kid. Yes. Because we've developed a new respect, new value for whales. And now there's an even greater understanding that whales, dolphins, sharks, cod, grouper, snapper, krill in Antarctica, all of these creatures are part of the carbon cycle. Birds on the land, animals, trees, nature. This is what has developed a climate that is favorable to us and the rest of life on Earth as we know it, the carbon cycle. We didn't talk about things of this sort when I was a kid because we didn't really have the knowledge that made understanding possible. So now economists are in the game, if you will, the game of survival, understanding that trees have a carbon value that drives climate. And we can look at various mechanical means, engineered solutions to drawing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. But hey, that's what nature's been doing throughout the history of life on Earth with photosynthesis, capturing carbon, generating oxygen, the carbon that's captured turned into sugar that drives the great ocean food webs and food webs on the land. And our food, as well as that of birds and insects and little fish and big fish, and it's the way of the world. And kids get it because they have grown up in the 21st century of understanding these big concepts that have taken all preceding history to really understand. What is air? What is photosynthesis? What are green plants doing? How do you take a seed and put it in the earth, and magically it takes the ingredients that are in the earth and out of the air, water, light, the existence of chlorophyll, the carbon dioxide. We need some in the atmosphere, but not too much. Some to power photosynthesis that keeps this cycle going. And knowing the miracle, call it a miracle. It is just nature, if you will, but maybe nature is the miracle, this complex interaction of collaboration among species, the networks of life in the soil, the networks of life in a forest, in a coral reef, in a kelp forest, that working together over hundreds of thousands, over hundreds of millions of years, have transformed rocks and water into this thriving metropolis of life of which we're a part. And lucky us as humans, along with maybe in one form or another all of life on Earth, feeling the positive energy of systems that are intact, that are thriving, and now the pain of watching the destruction of nature. Those images of koalas that are suffering because of the forests that are burning in Australia, the orangutans in Borneo from the forests that are burning or being deliberately cut, displacement of nature and how nature suffers, and the pain that we feel, but nature feels it as well. All these, the misery in animals that we can feel. We have the empathy. And sometimes you see it, maybe it's much more widespread than what we are able to witness, but I'm confident that there's pain in nature because of our actions. We not only are the great destroyers, we also have the capacity to heal and the pleasure of healing. We are at this amazing point that we should be thrilled that we're 21st century human beings because we have the power of knowing and the power of caring, the power of healing that is emerging from this power of destroying.
So I want to ask you a question. I was going to ask you this later, but it feels appropriate now. And then I do want to come back to hope spots, which is what I asked, and you went off on that beautiful diatribe about, I think, really what's going on here. I've interviewed many amazing people on this show, from scientists like yourself, filmmakers, writers, leaders of top nonprofits, conservationists, etc. And at some point, I would ask them, "Hey, what's the number one thing we need to do to face the challenges, right? To turn the tide?" And it actually surprised me that everybody said pretty much the same thing. And that was, what we need is an elevation in consciousness. So I'm curious, for you, as a woman of science, is a spiritual awakening what is most needed?
I think you're onto something in terms of that thing that we pride ourselves is we're special because we have empathy with others. I know we're not unique in that respect. I mean, that you can feel the pleasure and the pain of others.
Yes.
And you're motivated because you can put yourself in the position of others. You can see when an animal is in trouble, we have this desire to help. Not all people have that desire, but it is, I think, potentially there. Children have it naturally, but somewhere along the way, we lose that thing that we prize the most: curiosity, caring, empathy. And some don't lose it. They, in fact, really develop it at an ever enhanced way. And we need a lot more of that. It comes out in us when we hear music. It's what, in some measure, provokes poetry. And it certainly should and often does provoke action. Action sufficient to overcome some of the tried and true values that we have about money, about wealth as we define wealth. What is wealth? I think increasingly happiness is a kind of wealth. How do you measure that? Happiness, wealth, in terms of an old growth forest that represents the distillation of all preceding history, still intact. Old growth ocean, kelp forests that haven't been destroyed by the dredging and filling and creating altered shorelines, or the societies of creatures that have somehow escaped this great wave of killing that has characterized the 20th century as we became ever and ever more adept at finding, capturing, and marketing life from the ocean. There were actually more whales killed in the 20th century than during all preceding time of people killing whales for whatever purposes. Why? Because we got really good at it with technologies to find, capture, kill, and market whales that didn't exist in previous years. Even though there was a lot of killing going on, we really got extremely good at it. And now we're extremely good at killing other forms of wild animals from the sea. Squid. I mean, when you think of what we've done to squid in this century, let alone the 20th century, the latter part in particular, finding, capturing, and turning them into bait, turning them into fertilizer, turning them into food for cats and dogs and whatever. And yes, we eat a few, but it's not food security that justifies killing squid or any other creature from the sea. In fact, any animal. Now we know that we've got lots of evidence that throughout all of our history, eating animals has not dominated our diet. It's probably been there as a part of our diet, but in a far lesser quantity than what we now choose to make a part of our diet. Yes. Having meat 3 times a day. I mean, come on. It's not only not healthy for us, it's really not healthy for the planet. And even a little shift could make a big difference in the health of the planet and in our own personal health. We've got the evidence. And if you choose to just have a plant-based diet, there's, again, ample evidence that your health can really prosper if you go that way. A lot of people will not choose that way, but it's certainly out there to be done, and it would be a great tendency for us to move more in that direction, because the cost now with 8 billion people to have the kind of diet that we become through marketing, it's marketing that causes us to savor, got to have beef in any one of many different ways that is presented to us through the marketers as this is the right thing to do, or this is the tasty thing to do, or this is the
healthy thing to do,
a sign of luxury.
Yes.
Anyway, but we have choices. What are we going to do about it? You said that you've asked people, what can we do? It's look in the mirror. It's one choice times 8 billion choices that will move us in whatever direction we're going to go. We have been moved in the direction through marketing to make choices that here we are. We have learned behavior about extracting from nature on a scale that we now have evidence. It's perfectly clear that this is not sustainable. We're feeding habits that are not in our best interest. So we can choose.
We can choose.
And you can choose, whoever you are, about what you eat, what you wear, where you go, how you travel, how you invest your money, if you have money to invest, how you make a living. Everybody does have to make choices every day that will take you to wherever you are, to the next place. What you teach your children should be a part of the solution. How do we get to a better place? What do you value? What do you value? Is it your place in society as somebody who's giving back? Or do you value having more money than just anybody else in your neighborhood or anybody else that you, in the world? Do you want to be the richest person? Well, the richest person may not be the person who has the most money or the most things or the most, however you value possessions. It's nice to have some beautiful things around you, but what's beautiful? A 1,000-year-old tree, a century-old turtle that you can visit, a whale that is not turned into meat and oil, but is out there for you to really engage, or not. You just know that they're there and that you've had a part in keeping them safe. A world that is safe for your children, better than the world that we are in today. 21st century humans are the luckiest ones ever to have lived, because we have the defining choice. Will there or will there not be a safe place in the rest of this century, or in the centuries and millennia to follow? We are at the edge. We're right at the edge. We're either going to make it or break it in the next little piece of time. Some say the next decade, between now and 2030, is the defining time for humankind. And knowing that so can either be overwhelming, and you'll say, nothing I can do. I think I'll just enjoy myself, or I give up.
Yeah.
In which case, about the 8 billion people making choices, you're part of the problem. Because what you do counts, either in a positive way or in a negative way. It's up to you. Use your power. It's your superpower of knowing what is now known that could not be known before the 21st century. Einstein was really smart, and he really cared about the nature of the world, but he had never seen Earth from space. Climate change was not really the focus of the world that he lived in. No one had been to the deepest part of the ocean to confirm that the ocean is alive from the top to the bottom, and that there's trash at the bottom of the ocean right now because of us. I mean, he did not and could not know, nor could anyone else. I didn't know. I could not know what is now not only known to me, but it's known to 10-year-old kids. We've got a winning hand. We do. We know what to do. We can see Earth is in trouble, and as Earth goes, as the ocean goes, so goes human civilization and everything we care about.
So let me kind of, if I can, tie it all together. We first started talking about knowledge, right? We have the knowledge today that we didn't have before. And when you combine that knowledge with the empathy and curiosity that is innate for us as human beings, that leads to us having the choice to take the actions that, like you said, we're kind of at this crossroads. We're either going to drive the car off the cliff,
Yes.
or we're going to figure this out. We're going to figure out how 8 billion going on 10 billion people can live in harmony. But we know how to fix this thing.
Right.
We have the actions. We know what actions to take.
Yeah.
And like you said, ultimately it's up to each one of us to look in the mirror. And that's the spiritual awakening that I asked you about. Like, it's not a technology. It's not the government that's going to fix things. It's us. It's our internal reality that's creating this external reality, right? And deciding what are our virtues, what are our values, what do we stand for? Am I picking up what you're putting down?
Yeah, exactly. Putting it in a few words. And, this is not about whale hugging or tree hugging, or maybe it is a bit, but really it's about concern over the future of us, of
Yes.
human hugging. It's real. We're not making this up. This is not a fairy tale. It's the reality that is there for us to address, and lucky us that we can see it. I keep saying, imagine if we didn't know that we're in trouble. You can't fix things if you don't know that you've got a problem.
And that's what I
And
was
there's
speaking
one
to
more.
earlier. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, and
When
I'll
when
come
I
back.
talked about humans having the consciousness, the awareness, where as much as a dolphin has consciousness and awareness, they can't fix the problems that we've created, and we have that ability.
Correct.
That was my point earlier.
That's
What were you
exactly
going to say?
right.
Yeah. What were you
I
going to say?
apologize for kind of stepping all over you when you're right in the midst of a really important, beautiful thought, because you're right. You know, they're really intelligent, and I think caring wild creatures like dolphins, whales, elephants. I mean, we have evidence of that, and wolves. Um, and it's streaming through life on Earth. This empathy for others, from your families to beyond. But we are the ones who are causing the problems. We know what they are. Elephants, even if they knew what the problems are, don't
Yes.
have the capacity to fix what we have done. We have to fix it. And we fix it, but by where you started, give nature a break, you know, on the land and in the sea. Just step back. Ask yourself, if you had all the money in the world, or let's just start with $100 billion, which is not all the money in the world, but it's a lot. Okay, make a tuna fish from scratch. Here it is. You've got you just turn loose all of the energy, all the capacity that humans have developed. Make me a tuna fish, or make me a dolphin, make me a tree. Make me a tree from scratch that is right now. I want a 10,000-year-old thing, or let's just make it a 100-year-old tree. And I want it now. Oh, we know how to kill a 100-year-old tree, but put it back, you have to wait another 100 years. And when you put it back, it's not the same. The world has moved on. The composition of the soil is different in 100 years. We are so good at destroying, at taking, and not, well, and taking for granted that it's all there for us. It's all about us right now, my life, my time. We're so fortunate that we are preceded by legions of our fellow humans and even greater numbers of other creatures who have made Earth habitable for us, and humans who have figured out how to make clothes, how to make cell phones, how to make computers that make it possible for us to have this conversation, the
Mm.
ability to create stuff, things that we use in our everyday lives. Learned how to farm. Babies don't know. They have to learn from those around them. And we are the beneficiaries now, not only of all of those who have preceded us, developing societies that kids grow up in and take for granted that we know how to make pencils and shoes and all of that. They're just there. I think there's another angle that people are living longer. Why do societies of the past honor their elders? Well, they're the libraries that, even before there were libraries, those in earlier societies, a few individuals, lucky ones, who managed to survive longer than most and experienced where to find food, how to heal wounds, language, ultimately how to write language, how to communicate. how to have an alphabet, how to deal with numbers, and then ever more sophisticated. Whether we have this long history, but today, think of the benefits that are inherent in having people who live beyond the age of 30. I mean, it was uncommon 10,000 years ago, or even 500 years ago,
Right.
for people to live beyond a few decades. We have the collective experience, and in some cases, perhaps the wisdom that comes, and the intergenerational caring. Parents, of course, care about their kids, but grandparents have a special relationship with their kids, grandkids, that I think is a force to be reckoned with. Knowing cause and effect, of caring less as grandparents about owning things, having a wealth of objects. They're more inclined as grandparents to think about what you can do for the next generation because it's your legacy. It's you want to be remembered. When you're 30, you don't think so much about those things, even when you're 40 or 50. But the older you are, the more reflective you become about what's next. What are the kids? What's the world going to be like for them? So I think that we're experiencing around the world a new era of philanthropy that sometimes people are investing in themselves. Look, I'm going to do, my bucket list. Check it off. Well, on the bucket list, increasingly, are ways to make society better, to leave the world a better place, whether it's for your kids or just for society as a whole. Do you want to be remembered as a rogue who really just did the scorched earth way of living so you could have more? Or are you an individual who, through the ages, will be looked upon as we reflect on those who, throughout history, are honored and respected because they left more than great wealth in their bank. They left wealth in their poetry, in their art, in their music, in their behavior, in their ways of understanding the world and giving back to the world. Because we are social creatures. We'd like to think perhaps we're all, and we are, every individual, every one of us, like every cat, every dog, every dolphin, every tree, we're all individuals, but the miracle is that we're all connected and we need one another. We are not just, cut off from, we can't survive any more than an ant crawling around absent its home base. We need one another. We need our history, and the future needs us to take that into account.
Beautiful. So I have two more topics I want to hit before we wrap up today. One you brought up earlier that I wanted to bring up, and that is your dream of a fleet of little submarines to take people down 1,000 meters. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that in 2013, a good portion of the money dried up for manned undersea exploration. So my question is, how can we assure that the technology and funds will exist so the process doesn't become fully robotic, so we don't lose that human connection that you were just speaking of that we need so badly? So why do we want to go down that deep, and how can we make sure we can send humans down there, not just robots sending us pictures of it?
Well, we need the robots. We need autonomous systems. We need remotely operated systems that are piloted by somebody sitting on the surface, just as having little rovers up on Mars that are piloted by those back here on Earth. Those are really helpful, and especially helpful in going places where, at least presently, it's kind of tricky, dangerous for humans to go, like far beneath the ice in Antarctica. It's nice to have some robots pave the way, but actually we have submarines that have transited under the ice at the Arctic, where there's no big continent to get in the way. So anyway, having the ability to go high in the sky has made it as people understand why humans need to be out there exploring. Kathy Sullivan, skywalking astronaut, says, well, robots don't have any sense of humor. They can't tell you why they want to go. I can tell you. Others have said, you cannot surprise a machine. They're just there to do their job, and they're programmed to be bringing back evidence of what they see or what they sense with cameras and sensors. But humans bring experience. Humans bring the capacity to choose. Humans have this, what you've been referring to as a spiritual connection that no machine can replicate. So, yeah, just try inspiring a machine. You can try, but it's that will to want to know, that curiosity that is inherent in humans. So my keen desire, not only to take the technology that already exists, to constantly be on the lookout of what we can do to make systems better, to create systems that can be adapted to new ways of sensing the ocean or documenting the ocean. The idea of democratizing access to the sea. It is happening. I'm so pleased to see in the 21st century dozens of little manned submersibles, some of them like tourist subs with 25, 30, even more people, like getting into a bus and taken out to see a coral reef. Not very deep, not much deeper than divers can go, but we live in a time when going deeper is possible. So even my real goal is to have submersibles that are able to go to full ocean depth. And there are subs that are now capable of doing that. Not many. I mean, Trieste was a little sub built and took two people to the deepest part of the ocean in 1960. And there are robots that have been down there. And as of 2019, Victor Vescovo has made descents. Well, and before him, James Cameron, a little sub that took him all by himself to the deepest part of the ocean. And now possible to go and take others to go. So more people now have been to the bottom of the ocean than who have been to the moon. You couldn't say that before 2019, before 2020, actually. So we're getting there, but it's still not easy. It's really easy to get in a small airplane solo or in a little aircraft or a big aircraft and go 7 miles high in the sky. You can't go 7 miles up in a tiny little airplane, but we're with what you described as a fleet. Let's start with 2,000 subs that will take 3 people in each sub, so that teachers, kids, CEOs, fishermen can actually drive the little subs themselves with a seasoned pilot to look after them. So it's not a matter of what we did with a project with National Geographic and NOAA over the Sustainable Seas expeditions. We had access to little one-person subs, and the deepest one could go to 1,000 meters. The little system that my daughter Liz Taylor and I had, working with the company that I started, helped build 3 1,000-meter subs, one person and two-person deep rover subs. And now this venture that my daughter and son-in-law own and operate, Deep Ocean Exploration and Research, working with the nonprofit Hope Spot organization to really have little subs that are dedicated to access to the sea and making it open, making it possible for kids to be explorers on a new scale. I mean, I love these other little subs that are out there, and some are being used for exploration, mostly for science. I mean, the Alvin submarine is really champion of all champions. It's been out there since 1964 in various iterations to go deeper than the little Deep Hope subs are able to go. 1,000 meters is a good start. It's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to go anywhere in the ocean. And that's another vision of the deep search submersibles, to be able to, again, democratize access to the sea. I mean, think how many cars there are, how many boats, how many airplanes that are taking people everywhere else. And 7 miles is no big deal going high in the sky or laterally, but going down that deep, it's a very big deal right now. But the technology exists, and the exploitation is moving full speed ahead with fishing, with mining, with exploitation, even before we have a chance to see who's living there and how to be able to demonstrate and to justify protection. I mean, for me, knowing what we now know is good enough. I think we have plenty of evidence that says we have to put on the brakes with exploiting new intact parts of the planet, whether it's an old growth forest or deep sea mining or taking fish from Antarctica or krill. Let's just wait, stop. We need them alive, intact, to hold the planet steady, to keep the Earth safe, to restore health to places that have been damaged. And you know, we can't go back to what was. We can restore some areas to better health, as you have experienced right there in Southern California. What we've seen in Cabo Pomo, what we've seen with the recovery to some extent of whales across the globe when we stop killing them. But let's stop the killing of nature. Let's heal our relationship with nature. And knowing that the high seas, the part of the planet that is beyond national jurisdiction, it is currently, it's like open season. It's the Wild West.
Wild West, yeah.
A handful of nations are out there exploiting on an industrial scale ocean wildlife. A handful of nations, companies behind a few nations that have license to kill, that is, to take manganese nodules from the deep sea. And it's happening this year. 2022 is a pivotal year in terms of making decisions about protection from the global commons, the high seas, the deep seas, beyond national jurisdiction, and even within the 200-mile limit the coastal nations have agreed to assign for their exclusive economic zones. This is truly that moment of choice. Will we or will we not succeed in the 21st century? And or will we continue the path of consuming nature beyond the point of recovery? We've done it with species by species. You know, this is what people are referring to, geologists are referring to as the Anthropocene, the era of great dying. Well, you could say dying, but it's the great era of killing. These animals, these forests don't have to go out of existence. We have a choice. We really do. And there's plenty of evidence, and it doesn't take a learned scientist looking at columns of figures and graphs and and models of what the future will be. You can see it. You can taste it in the air, in the water, in the poisoned planet. in the planet that is clearly in trouble, that puts us in trouble. But we can be the healers. We have to be, if there is to be a future for civilization, even as we now know it, but to even be better. We can look back in time and learn from history where choices have been made that have taken us to very bad places. But we can also make choices that can find that relationship with nature that can have an enduring place for ourselves within the natural systems, not constantly consuming them.
Very well said. Yeah, what I'm hearing, it's going to boil down to our connection and relationship with nature. Will we make that decision?
And one another.
And one another and ourselves, right?
Yeah.
It's how we treat ourselves, how we treat each other, and I've said this before. I feel like if I truly love myself, or I'll say it this way, if I don't love myself, how can I love you? And if I can't love myself, I can't love you. I'm not going to care about, like you're saying, people, they're just not going to care about nature and the planet as much. So it really boils down to me loving myself, loving my community, loving other humans, loving the planet, everything. So kind of goes back to what I was saying about the
I love being alive.
Awakening. You what?
I love being alive.
Yes.
I realize that when I look around, how is it that I'm here at all? You look at the stars, not very friendly up there. Earth is friendly to us, or at least it has been. But Sir Ken Robinson, I think, in a phrase, summed it up, that we are creating circumstances inamicable to our thriving. He said it in a kind of a nerdy way, but we're making Earth so that it's not nice. Earth is becoming hostile. You can't trust the water that you drink. You can't trust the air you breathe. You can't trust what you're eating. It's not very friendly. There's things that I always took for granted would be always here, like snow, pure rain falling out of the sky. You want to say, what's in that rain? What's in that snow? I don't think I want to breathe the air in this place. I want to wear a mask because it's not as friendly. It's hostile. And that's, so I love being alive. And I love the fact that Earth is alive. I want to create life as something sacred. And we need to think of nature as something sacred. Of course, we'll use it. Yes, we will continue to take trees, and yes, we will, consume whatever it takes so that we can live. All animals do, and trees do too. All life takes from nature, but we're at a point where we have an outsized responsibility, and we have maybe unique in all of life on Earth. We can see the consequences of our actions and anticipate what to do, not just on an individual scale, like birds building a nest or squirrels putting seeds away for the winter, whatever it is. We can look far into the future, just as we have the capacity, like no others, to look way back in the past. Geologists, historians, all of us have the access to this knowledge that is our superpower. I can't flap my arms and fly, but I have this thing that I carry on my shoulders that has been acquiring from all the books, all the information that I learn from experience, that I learn from the experiences of gazillions of others that are distilled into knowledge that all I have to do is soak it up and We value that. We send our kids to school to soak it up, learn what civilization has learned over the ages, and go ye forth and make a place for yourself. And here I am, one of the multitude, with the privilege of being alive in the 21st century, and I love it. And I want everybody to love this moment in time and say, here I am. What am I going to do? I have knowledge that no one else had before. 100 years ago, nobody could know what I can know. Nobody can know it all, and nobody can do it all. But you, because you're unique, you, whoever you are, you, one of 8 billion, you can do something nobody else can do because there's no other you. You've got something. Mr. Rogers used to say it all the time. You're special, kid. Never for a moment doubt that you have the power to make a difference, either by doing nothing, you're part of the problem, or by pulling up your socks, or putting on your flippers, or your running shoes, or your whatever it is, whoever you are, and go for it.
Yes. Well, I think that feels like a really good stopping point for now. I'm with you, Dr. Earle. I love being alive. I love you. I appreciate your commitment and passion. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today and sharing your heart and your wisdom with our audience. It's been a beautiful conversation. We'll share links to all of your amazing projects in Mission Blue and the best ways that people can find out more about what you're up to and support your work. And I just want to say thank you again. That is our show, everybody, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Sylvia.